Hi again, everybody, and welcome to a special day of protest edition of Newsmakers TV. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. And today we're speaking with organizers of the big No Kings Here rally this Saturday in Santa Barbara. The local event is one of nearly 1,500 in communities across the U.S. A coordinated day of national protest against the illegal, corrupt, cruel, and incompetent policies of the Trump regime. Joining me to talk about it are leaders of Indivisible Santa Barbara, a nonprofit organization and part of the nationwide Indivisible movement, working to defeat the rogue agenda of our reality TV president. I'm very pleased to welcome to the program Ian and Myra Page, who allegedly retired to Santa Barbara in 2016, whereupon they immediately threw themselves into political activism during the first Trump term. Uh, Myra formerly managed a synagogue in Northridge and is co-leader of Commit to Democracy in Santa Barbara and Montecito. Ian had a long career as an attorney and has worked with the Immigrant Legal Defense Center. Joining them is Larry Barrett, a retired attorney and software engineer on the steering committee of Indivisible, and Keith Carlson, an IT executive who leads Indivisible steering committee. Welcome to all, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with newsmakers today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Before we talk about Saturday's rally and protest, I just want to go around the horn and do a little political level set. This day of protest, No Kings, was originally envisioned as a response to Trump's self-aggrandizing military parade planned for Saturday, coincidentally on his birthday, which is, an obscene display when millions are told there's no money for Social Security, SNAP, Medicaid, and schools. But given events in the last couple of days in LA, it seems to me the stakes have really been raised. Myra, say a word about the political moment in which we find ourselves and why Saturday's protest matters.
Jerry, I think I find myself tortured by everything every single day, sometimes every hour of every day. Sometimes I avoid the news because I just simply can't take it. Other times I watch intently to see if I can find anything actually factual in the news. We collectively and independently feel the need to support all organizations in Santa Barbara and to support our immigrant community. And it took a turn last weekend with what happened in Los Angeles and his need to call out the National Guard against all laws and to bring in the Marines, entirely unnecessary. And so now our event on Saturday is turning into something else entirely. Both No Kings, because of this North Korean type celebration display of army in Washington, D.C. And now with our immigrant community, I just feel so compelled to make sure that the public is aware of everything that's taking place in a truthful way. And we just aren't seeing that in the news. And when half of the United States is watching Fox News, it's difficult to remind people about the significance and importance of the travesty of justice that's taking place in this country.
Yeah. Ian, I'm going to take a wild guess and say you're almost as old as me, probably lived through the 60s and so on. But did you ever imagine that you would see the kind of spectacle in the U.S. that we are seeing unfold in LA?
No, absolutely not. And you're right, Jerry. We're probably contemporaries within a few months of each other. But what has happened over the last 40 years, starting in California with Ronald Reagan, I think we've seen the Republican Party having done a lot better job with their homework and their backroom deals than the Democrats. The Republicans appear to have had a strategy to take over the Supreme Court going back decades. And with Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, they've implemented plans that have come to a head in Trump 1.0 and now certainly in Trump 2.0 to instill what they believe is a more powerful and unitary executive and disregarding the Constitution. And one of, I think, our biggest problems in the United States is that our civics classes in our schools have failed the public because people really don't know what the Constitution says, what the Declaration of Independence says, what their rights are. And they don't really know that what Trump is doing is not just illegal, but unconstitutional. So a lot of what Myra and I and Keith and Larry are trying to do is really educational in process. I think that's what our indivisible goal is to educate, as Myra was saying, people about the truth, because so much of what people get is falsity. And the problem with the media today is they have pretty much just bent over backwards to ignore reality and to play into what Trump's message is. So that's, I am astounded by the way the right wing has been able to accomplish what they've been able to accomplish. I thought our democratic institutions were stronger, and unfortunately, we have to rebuild now from the ground up. And since I hit that point, and that's really what Indivisible is. I mean, nationwide, it's ground up. I mean, we're building up from a grassroots organization, and it's getting huge.
You know, that's such an important point about civics education. I was talking to our intern who's 20 years old the other day, you know, about all this, and I was ranting about democracy, and she said, "You have to understand, Trump has been here half of my life. This seems normal to me. I don't, you know, I mean, she's smart, so she understands that it's not, but for her generation, it's so difficult." All right, Larry, you know, one of the things that's extraordinary about LA is Trump's not only called out the National Guard, he's called out the Marines. And then he had this really sickening rally up in the Northwest this week with the troops behind him, you know, cheering him on. And, you know, this idea that he's going to have this military parade, which we never had in the U.S., is kind of a turning point where it seems to me he's trying to make the military answerable to him, the leader, rather than to the Constitution. You know, how significant do you find his actions with the military this week?
It's a test. It's a test of our military's devotion to their oath to defend the Constitution. And it's going to be a stern test. If you have friends in the military, you know how seriously they take that oath.
Yes.
The military culture and their reverence for the Constitution, their reverence for being a force that's above politics is extremely strong. But it's coming up against a very determined and focused president who has always seen the generals as, quote, his generals, who demands personal loyalty above all other qualities and lately in place of all other qualities. There are any number of people in this administration who have no qualifications for the high office they're holding, except unswerving loyalty to Donald Trump. It's going to be an epic battle, and that's where I think No Kings comes into place. That we are here to remind the powers that be, whether they're in the Pentagon or in the Congress, or for that matter, in the offices of our county board of supervisors, that we have not forgotten the way democracy is supposed to work. While our norms are being bent, they haven't been broken. we haven't forgotten the the way things used to be. And we've always been an imperfect democracy, but we're now considerably more imperfect
Yeah.
than we were.
Yeah. Keith, let me build on Larry's points about the guardrails. And that's a huge difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2. And I think some of us who were screaming about this from the rooftops, people said, we lived through them once, but it'll be fine. It's different because I mean, he's removed the guardrail. He knows where they are. And the other thing that's happened is that so many of our institutions have capitulated. Business did immediately. A lot of law firms did. A lot of universities have. The Democrats have just been feckless. So there's not a lot of institutional uh, pushback, which seems to me to make the importance of mass protest more important. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, we're trying to show businesses and institutions like universities that they can have a spine, that we're out there, and if they join us, we will all have a spine, and that is the only way we're going to get through this, is to get through it together. Um, we hope that as more and more people get out on the streets, and we're expecting a lot of people on the streets on the 14th, that our partners in the community will see us, that businesses will see us, that universities will see us. You are here as journalists see us, and we hope that the oligarchs and the people in the administration know that we're not going to lay down. We're going to stand up, and we're going to be here for the next 4 years, if not longer, if we have to. I mean, we
Okay.
were here since 2017, and we're going to be here till 2028 and probably beyond, because even if Trump's out of office, which, boy, we hope he's out of office in 28,
Hmm.
movement is still going to be around. MAGA's not going away, and we need to be there every minute of every day that they're there.
Yeah. Myra and Ian, let me ask you this. Myra, you mentioned the news media, and the newsmakers, we ran a piece about that this morning about kind of how the language and the framing and the narratives that are being presented by the mainstream media are sort of playing into Trump's hands. That we need to quell these riots, which he started, and
Pictures of burning Waymo.
yeah, and it's kind of a thing. I mean, are you at all concerned that even with a successful day of mass protest across the country, which maybe the media won't be able to ignore this time, the way they did with the hands-off rallies, um, uh, that this is exactly what Trump wants, that he's creating, and I'm not drawing a parallel here, but a kind of Reichstag fire moment where he can sort of try to implement more authoritarian measures.
which is exactly why Indivisible is not having one of these protests in Washington, D.C.,
Right.
because we don't want to give him the opportunity to call out um, the military. The big event is going to be in Philadelphia instead. And I believe that we are actually up to about 1,800 protests across the country
1,800.
now. Um, no, I don't think he wants this. I don't think he wants to see these protests. I think it irks him to the umpteenth degree. I think he hates to be belittled in the public. But I just want to add how improper or inappropriately our news media outlets, CBS, NBC, ABC, are handling covering the Trump administration. Just today, I heard that Terry Moran on ABC was fired because of a post that he
Yep.
did on I think it was X. I'm not sure which one it was, and they had no choice. They said but to fire him because he called Trump and his
Miller.
minions
Yeah,
haters.
he told the truth about Stephen Miller.
Told the truth. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's his job as a journalist, is to tell the truth, and he did.
Yeah.
we
Uh,
have a friend who works for Wilmer Hale, the big law firm in the United States, and she is so proud of what they did against Trump and not capitulating to him. I think it's important to point out the law firms that aren't capitulating to him, and they're not doing that. The press isn't doing that. We need to talk more. I mean, we're talking about Harvard, sure, but there are other universities in the country that are speaking out as well. We have to really cover the truth and the reality, and they are not equipped to do it out of fear of being fired or
I mean, they're
bad mouthed by the Trump administration, singled out, targeted, whatever. And somehow we have to find a way to overcome all of this. And it's a daily battle, and it's exhausting. And that's exactly what he wants us to feel, is exhausted enough to give up.
Great.
And we're not giving up.
Jerry,
That's a
you
There
brought up
are,
the you
there
brought up
are
the
everywhere,
Jerry.
everywhere there are hundreds of small acts of courage that take place every day. And we see a lot of them. The numbers of people who have joined the 805 Rapid Response Network. Uh, we've had people we've asked to speak at events that we know faced institutional pressure, and said, I'm going to speak my truth for a few minutes."
Yeah.
Those
Yeah, one
things
of our
don't get the
hands-off.
coverage,
Yeah.
because they don't appear to be news when people do small and decent things, but they're extremely important, and we see it every day.
Yeah. Ian, let me ask you a question. You spent your career in the legal system, and we were talking a minute about the lack of institutional pushback against Trump, and about the only place that it has manifest has been in the courts, or some of the courts, some of the federal district courts and courts of appeals. Um, just say a word, if you would, about what's your view of how resilient do you think the legal system is going to be in pushing back until at least we can get to this 2026 midterm election and the Democrats have a betting chance of taking back at least one house of Congress?
There are some lawyers and law firms who are really fighting the fight. Mark Elias being one of them, and the win-lose ratio in Trump litigation is he loses about 96% of the time, and that does take into account the fact that he has appointed a lot of federal judges that are hearing these cases. So the legal system itself does seem to be holding the line, but with Trump's attacks on the judges, saying that they should be impeached or that they're crazy, or whenever they rule against him, that they're worthy of his contempt and the contempt of MAGA. That does present a problem. I think part of the issue with the legal system now is everything in the world is profit driven. And I think a lot of what was happening in these major law firms, when they had their partnership meetings, they ran their numbers and figured out which clients they might lose and which clients they might keep, and which ones were going to generate the most billable hours and what was going to be in the best interest of the partnership. And that's why we also see a lot of partners leaving those firms that capitulated and moving over to firms that are saying no to Trump and who wanted to vote no. And now those firms that have stood up to Trump, their business is increasing, and those
Right.
firms who capitulated, their
Those are your
business
clients.
is losing. They're losing business because their clients are looking at, well, if you won't stand up to Trump, how are you going to stand up for me? So I think the legal system may hold, but you brought up Trump looking at this as maybe being a Reichstag moment. He has done so many things that he could choose to be the impetus for even greater activity on his part that is wrong. It's not just Los Angeles that's in flames. Thousands of people were demonstrating in San Francisco, Chicago, New York, all over the country. But what I really find worrisome is that he is now taking on the governor of California, and Gavin Newsome, who unfortunately drifted more than just a little bit right in his podcast career. He's now come back very strong on the left.
Yeah, that speech he gave last night was very strong. We ran
The
the
speech he gave
transcript
was
of it.
great.
I
Yep.
thought it was excellent.
And
Yeah.
the moment that we're looking at is if Trump is going to start taking on governors, Democratic governors, to try and make his point with his MAGA supporters, what may happen next is truly unknown. And have we hit the point now where peaceful demonstrations are only going to go so far because they're going to be met with him calling out the National Guard, him trying to get Hegseth to activate the Marines. And as soon as we have something more than rubber bullets being fired, then we're in a real quandary. It's not even a constitutional issue anymore. It's a survival of democracy issue.
Yeah. Keith,
So
that I agree. I couldn't agree more with that take on Newsom's speech. The importance of sort of mainstream elected officials, Democrats, whatever party, I think is so important, but they just haven't been there very often.
Yeah.
Um, I think
We're lucky. We have Salute.
we have Salute.
He's been doing great. We are very close with him and we are very proud of him.
Let me ask you this though. Um, One of the most repulsive stories I read in the last 24 hours, this guy Vivek Ramaswamy, another of the IT oligarchs,
Yeah, one of my faves.
was I don't know when he was on Newsmax or someplace, but he was noting that the last time a president called out the National Guard against the wishes of a governor, it was George Wallace in 1965 in Alabama, and comparing Gavin Newsome to George Wallace, saying it was basically the same case. What do you
Wow.
do, or what does anyone do with this crazy media environment we live in, where people are just kind of locked in their bubbles and unwilling to come out and living on social media? I mean, as a group, and when you talk about this, how do you push back against that?
Boy, that is a societal question, and I don't know how we're going to get over the silos that people have sorted themselves in. I mean, it really started with Facebook 15 years ago. That in the way that the algorithm works, just ended up putting people into silos and giving them their own feed of information, and that has only increased because Fox News has figured out a profit strategy that they feed raw meat to their base, and that encourages them to just watch them and to not look at any other news, attack other news outlets like NPR or PBS that are straight down the middle. I mean, absolutely not influenced on either way. We watch MSNBC, but we know that's the bubble. We know that is partly the liberal bubble. We listen to NPR, and they have just as many Republican Congress people on as they do Democratic Congress people on. But they're attacking them because they're not sold in to the way that the administration wants to color their news, that wants to color the way people think. And so the quicker they can defund them, the quicker they can get rid of NPR and PBS and other outlets, the better it is for them. It's something that's going to have to be dealt with at a societal level. And and AI is not going to help that, I don't think. I mean, because
No,
you
it's gonna.
can, yeah, it's going to increase, because AI is going to look to please whoever it has been given it a prompt. It will answer back, what you want to hear, because that's what it does. Um,
Yeah. Just a
yeah,
brief aside on AI. This is totally tangential, but I had to give a speech recently, and I need some jokes for the start. So I went to AI and I sort of typed in the details. Hey, jokes, and it turned out 12 jokes. None of them were funny. So that might be the one thing that AI can't do. All right, you've all been so generous with your time. Let's talk about Saturday a little bit, and I'll just throw it out there. I'm not sure who wants to answer, but first of all, just kind of the basics on the logistics, where, when, and what people should do who want to attend.
Actually, before we get into that, let me just make one point. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, and people say that, and then they spout out conspiracy theories. But I don't think that the timing of the deployment of the Marines and the National Guard to LA is necessarily coincidental a week before we're going to put on a big nationwide protest to the big event that's going, having tanks, having Abrams rolling down Constitution Avenue. I think that they probably figured that they needed to do this right before we have these protests, and before, you have pictures of the military now in LA a week before you're going to have pictures of the military on the streets of DC. I think that they thought that those two images would go together, and so this week is where we see the ramp up of that.
That's a very good yeah, important messaging point.
So I think it could actually bring a bigger crowd.
Well,
we may
absolutely.
lose a few people because they're fearful of getting caught up in something they don't want to be a part of. But I actually think it's going to bring more people because now we're even angrier. And our event begins at 10:30 on Cabrillo. We are hoping for a very large turnout so that our human chain will go for at least a mile. People will gather at 10:30 on Cabrillo, anywhere
Cabrillo, where?
Chase Palm Park.
Chase Palm Park to Cesar Chavez and back to the park where they're going to be having the Juneteenth event. And we hope to encourage people to join that event, that celebration across the street from Los Baños. What's the name of the park?
Las Palmas.
Las Palmas Park. That's where Juneteenth is going to be. We're hoping from that point as far east as Cesar Chavez to extend that human.
You got the east and the west down. How many people
Yeah,
in Santa Barbara don't get it?
I've only lived here 25 years. I'm still working on it.
We've been here 9 years. I still don't know it.
And what time?
10:30.
Okay.
10:30.
And is there a formal program of speakers or?
No, we're not going to be doing speakers this time. We just want people to gather, protest, show their signs, display their signs, display their devotion to our Constitution, to this country on Flag Day, and the
Bring
importance and
flags.
significance of standing up to a wannabe dictator who considers himself a dictator.
We hope some people will bring flags because it's Flag Day.
Yes.
And we want to take our flag back.
Yeah.
And Jerry, I'd say the essential point is exactly a response to what you were saying about the news media and the false narratives. Getting people out of their bubbles means getting people in community, getting people talking to each other. There is a huge pent-up demand in our community for people to simply get together and be with each other.
Yes.
We can't organize demonstrations as quickly as our members are asking for them.
Yes.
We're trying. But at the end of the day, will there be millions of people on the streets of the United States? Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
But what will we accomplish? I think the most important thing we're going to accomplish is to simply be aware of each other and simply be aware of the fact that none of us think this is normal, that we are all asking for a renewal of our democratic and civic values.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's such an important point, Larry, because Myra, you started out saying, how tortured you feel by all this, and I think, it's so difficult to not feel despair as an individual and to be depressed and to say, and it's all too big and there's nothing that I can do about it. Should I move to Portugal? And this point about community, understanding that there are other people, a lot of other people who feel the same way, and are willing to push back. Let me ask one final point, and it's a little sensitive, but we all know that anytime you get a large rally or protest group, there's always a couple of knuckleheads in it, or a couple of provocateurs, or people who just are nihilistic or anarchistic or whatever you want to say. Say a word to someone about sort of the importance of nonviolence here, and not giving Trump a pretext to take further actions.
Well,
Is that
nonviolence is important not merely, because Trump is looking for a pretext. If he's determined enough, he'll find one. The nonviolence is essential to the overall strategic thrust of our movement, which is we are trying to get people off the sidelines, to become activists. We are trying to convince our neighbors that we are indeed in the right, that we are bringing forward what some of the most important, some of the best things in America, and people are not going to see that if they see violence, if they see lawlessness, if they see, as you put it, knuckleheads. To move people in the right direction, we have to look sympathetic. We have to look like the good guys. And that's just hard-headed political, tactical thinking.
yes?
We are the good guys.
Well, I
there's
know
that.
that, but I mean, Keith, you and I are wearing black hats. Thank goodness Ian's got a white hat.
That's true.
All right. Before we go, any final words, thoughts, anybody wants to throw out there?
Actually, I do want to. Let me just quickly say,
Good.
Jerry, I'm a child of the Holocaust, and I know that Larry is too. And we see this pattern right now with this administration targeting the immigrant community in the manner in which it's doing right now. And so it is imperative that I stand, that all of us stand with the immigrant community in Santa Barbara, across the country, no matter where they come from, what country they come from. We must stand with them, because this happened before and we cannot let it happen again in the United States of America.
And to add to that, my father, who grew up in Nazi Germany, could cite a dozen different small acts of kindness from his German non-Jewish neighbors that made all of the difference, not just to his survival, but to his emergence from the experience as a whole functioning and loving father. So don't discount the importance of small things that don't make the news, because they could make all the difference in 50 years to somebody like me.
Absolutely.
Well said. All right. Well, Myra and Ian Page, Larry Barron, and Keith Carlson of Indivisible Santa Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. The event is No Kings. It's Saturday, 10:30, gathering on Cabrillo around Chase Palm Park. There'll be a human chain, and you won't have to listen to any speakers. It's really such a deal.
We will have some electeds
Okay.
at the event who will be walking around and talking to people.
But bring the,
Salute will be
it's
there. Yeah.
it's going to be, it's the human chain and all about the signs, it seems.
Yep, exactly.
And then meet us afterwards at Plaza Del Mar Park for Juneteenth.
Great. Super. All right. Thank you all again. Very
Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate
Very much. Thank you,
it a
Jerry.
lot.
Thank you, Jerry.
much.